Right now you're hearing music from my brand new Ableton Live pack called Dream Organ. Dream Organ is a collection of lush, dreamy, spacious sounds created from samples of the Yamaha PS20 organ synth. The Yamaha PS20 is very popular in the dream pop genre, and it was made famous by the band Beach House. It's featured on a lot of their music. It's got some really cool warm sounds, kind of toyish at times, but when we put it into Ableton Live racks, when we put some effects on it, arpeggiators, and start manipulating the sounds, we get a lot of really interesting and diverse sounds that can be used in any style of music. I've created instrument racks that accurately recreate the sound of the Yamaha PS20, and I've also taken those sounds and combined it with the power of Ableton Live to create stuff impossible with the original hardware and useful in all kinds of music. So check out the Dream Organ Ableton Live pack. It's available at my store at brianfunk.com. And if you're a member of the Music Production Club, you will get this during the month of July 2022. And if it's not July 2022 anymore, don't worry. There's always something new and exciting for the Music Production Club. You can learn more about Dream Organ by going to brianfunk.com/dream-organ. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Music Production Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Funk. On today's show, I have back again Francis Preve. And Francis probably needs no introduction. If you've played with a synthesizer or soft synth in the last, ever since there have basically been synthesizers, he's had his hand in how they sound. He's been designing presets for just about everything. A great quote from Peter Kern of CDM. He is the ghost in the shell of synthesizers. And it's just when you first start playing with these things, these presets you hear, these sounds that really shape a lot of like how we use our instruments have come from the mind and imagination of Francis Preve. So it's a privilege to have him back again, which I think this will be the third time you're on the show.
It might be, yeah.
It's always a great hang and a great chat, and it's nice to see you again, sir. Welcome.
Always a pleasure to see you too. I think the last time we saw each other IRL was in the before times at Loop LA.
Yeah,
I think that was the last time we got to actually chill in person.
One of the last times someday. I saw many people in this world of hours of music production and sound design.
That was when I got in trouble. I got in trouble because they were having like these, as always in California, having crazy fires, and they were distributing masks there for the fires.
Before this is they were cool.
2018. Yeah. So I I drew the Ableton logo on the mask.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, and then during the pandemic, every company made a swag mask for COVID. So, but a lot of people gave me side eye, so I took it off pretty promptly.
Innovating again, huh?
Just slightly ahead of the curve.
Yeah, that was my first experience with wildfires, and we all have our natural disasters wherever we live, but that's a different one from someone from Long Island. So I didn't know if we needed to get out of town quick or.
Well, Long Island never used to have hurricanes.
Yeah, no, I've had them my whole life.
Really?
Yeah, one of my early memories was Hurricane Gloria. I think that was like '86. And,
oh wow!
Yeah,
I thought hurricanes in the Northeast were a new thing.
Well, I think their frequency is new, and the once in a century thing is now like every other weekend sort of thing. But before we get to our gloom and doom, which I think is
let's jump out of the gloom and doom and let's
make this throw away
for our listeners. Yeah,
you've done some really cool work since we've last spoke, and you've sent over a nice little list that you threw together. You said of some of the things you've been working on in the last few years, and what I kind of got a kick out of is it's got basically almost every major synthesizer that has been released in the intervening time since we spoke. So you got the from Korg, the OP6, the Mod Wave, the Mini Korg, S700. You've made packs for the OP6. Then you've got everything Sequential's come out with: the Prophet 5, Take 5, the Oberheim, the new.
That's just the
Oberheim.
pandemic, but yeah.
Yeah, and it's just wild that you know, how do you find it hard to like come up with new ideas, or do the instruments sort of direct you in new directions?
When I first get an instrument, I have about 25 sounds that are kicking the tires sounds. So they're sort of bread and butter sounds that I know, like they're just sort of like my greatest hits. It's like, oh, Francis was here, kind of thing. But by doing those sounds, they all sound different on every synth because every engine is different, whether it's hardware or software. So I make those 25 sounds so that I can get a feel for what the actual sonic fingerprint of that synth is. There's one sound that I think has made it into almost every product I've ever done, and it's called Fantasia. And it's an homage to the original Roland D50, and it's a really simple sound. It's sort of like a mallet bell with a soft kind of sawtooth pad underneath it and a ton of reverb. And so I always that's my way of sort of marking the synth if the manufacturer leaves it in. It's called Fantasia, and it's see if your synth has it, and it's just an homage to one of my all-time favorite synths, which is a Roland D50, which is now available, of course, on Roland Cloud. And I think I've done a pack for it. Yeah,
I've got the DO5 within reach.
There you go,
little guy. It's pretty cool.
Oh, you have the little boutique.
Yeah, the boutique one.
I love those things. I think
my joystick is a little weird though. It's kind of like stuck.
Excuse me? What did you say?
The little that little
the controller, the XY controller on the
I think of it
D50.
like a joystick, like an arcade machine.
Yeah. That's how you could blend between partials.
Yeah, it doesn't kind of go to the upper half too well. But it's such a cool synth. I've been so into the cars over the last few years, and I think that's all over like Heartbeat City.
Yep, it's the Heartbeat City. It's in the same way that specifically with the Cars, because that Cars were one of my gateway bands for synthesizers.
Yeah, me too.
And the each Cars album tends to highlight that whatever technology was cutting edge at the time. And the first album was like mostly paraphonic stuff and string synths, and I think he actually used a Mini Korg or one of the early Korg monos. I could be wrong on that. Don't cancel me. But the Candio record, which was really the record where it's like, holy crap, this is the synthesizers were really dominant, and it predated UK synth pop like Depeche Mode and New Order by a few years, and that was mostly Prophet 5. So when that came full circle, and I ended up voicing the reissue of the Prophet 5, it was quite emotional, just because that was the first synth I'd ever touched. My grandmother, when as a child, I started to become fascinated with these synthesizers, because they were cool, and I liked Star Trek and comic books, and I felt like I was the master of sound and all of that. And she would run errands, and she would to give me something to do while she ran errands. When I was like 12, I think it was 12, 13, she would drop me off at the music store, and they had a Prophet 5, and that was the coolest synth in the store. So she would just like let me loose in the store, and I'd just hover over the Prophet 5 for hours until she came back, got her hair done or whatever.
That is cool. It's fun to picture a young 12-year-old version of yourself making spaceship noises in the local music shop.
Yeah, that's like, yeah. So when it's like I've been in a weird sort of way. I've been doing this about as close to all my life as you can get.
Hmm.
So
I think I read that Dave Smith said one of the first times he heard the Prophet 5 on a record was Let's Go by the Cars.
oh yeah, it was a
That
factory
opening,
preset.
bow, bow, bow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was the hard sync. I think I forgot which patch number it was. I'm not that much of a nerd. But yeah, that was that was one of the really distinctive sounds
Hmm.
that the Prophet could make.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
such a cool thing. And nice to hear.
R.I.P. Dave. That really hit me hard a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, I know it
Really
did.
hit me hard
Yeah.
because we had been friends for, I mean, not like BFFs, talking about like dinner or something like that, but we spoke regularly, especially in the before times when we'd see each other at NAMM. I think one of my favorite stories was I went to a synth conference, and I was always really respectful of Dave's time, even though he'd come to Austin and come to my parties back when I had a record label. And we were, we spoke fairly frequently. And there was this conference I was arriving at, and I really wanted to be respectful of his time. So I said, I just kind of like moved along. I think we made eye contact, but I just sort of wanted to let him have his conversation because he was talking to somebody else. And I got like about 10 feet past them, and he hollered out in the middle of the conference, "Francis, you better not walk by me without saying hi." And that was like, I felt really special for a few minutes there. So I was like, I didn't want to interrupt. He's like, "You can at least say hi." I was like, "Okay, Dad." So, but that really hit me hard. And I think it would behoove people who are passionate about synthesis, if they don't already know who he is, to go spend a little time on his Wikipedia page and any of his old interviews and just see how important he was. Like Bob Moog, great important, so.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think music in general, just the entire sound of music, would have been on a much different course.
Yeah, the Hills would not have been alive.
Yeah.
With the sound of music. Sorry. My brain's just always. Inventing MIDI. I mean, without MIDI, we would have, it would have all been voltage control.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine what music would have sounded like if we had just had to use like the Roland MC4 or MC8, their little voltage controlled precursors to MIDI sequencing.
Well, I don't think it would have got in the hands of so many people. I think the ease of it, the universality of it, made it so that someone like me that like didn't know anything about voltage control and just had a synth and had a software could make something connect without too much thought.
You can plug anything into anything. Now it's used for lighting control. Yeah. I mean, it's such a versatile protocol that you can use MIDI for things that it was never designed to be used for. It was really designed to be connecting synths and maybe having rack mount gear and some sequencing. And, games, even like, I mean, like if we're going to go, really ancient history by modern standards, one of my first gigs in Austin, when I got here 25 years ago, was working for a game audio consultancy, because the music from computer-based games was coming from your sound card. So if you had like a Creative Labs sound card or Roland, there were so many different sound cards, and they used something called General Midi, which most people nowadays aren't even aware of. And General Midi had the original bank of 128 presets, and oftentimes they were sampled. And General Midi, it was a standard that like if you pulled up preset 43 on a General Midi compatible synth, it would always be that company's sound. It's a little bit like what we were talking about earlier, where I do my array of 25 greatest hits just to hear what synths sound like. And in the General Midi days, to bring that full circle, in the General Midi days, depending on what sound card you had on your computer, those 128 different sounds, it would start with like piano and go all the way like into like harmonicas and sound effects and stuff. It would, how it would sound would depend on that card. And I think that that's actually really relevant to how different technologies sound.
What blows my mind about it too is just its longevity. I can't think of really anything that has been around that long. And now we're only just starting to talk about MIDI 2.0, which is still an evolution of that same technology. It's incredible.
I believe that MIDI may be the longest running computer standard. I'm not sure. I think it may even predate Ethernet. I could be wrong. It may be the longest running digital interface standard. I could be, again, I'm guessing it's certainly one of the longest running, if not the. So.
Yep. So, a lot is owed to that man, and I'm very thankful for his work. And
yes,
got my Prophet 6 right next to me. It's just my treasured synthesizer of all of them.
Since your background is blurred, I have to sort of. It's a bit of a game to see what you have. I didn't see the DO5. I do see. That's not that. Is that the sub fatty?
Yes.
Yes.
This would be the Moog sub fatty.
Yeah. That's the sub fatty over the Prophet 6. You got a nice little rig going there, sir.
Yeah, I got a couple Behringer little guys there, which are fun, Korg MS-20, the smaller one that came out.
Smaller one, yeah.
And the realistic Moog Concert Mate MG1.
That was my first synth.
Was it?
That was my first. That's
the Radio Shack?
Yes, that was the synth, the first synth I ever owned. And that's how I learned how to like in my home instead of at the music store's Prophet 5. That's exactly how I learned. It's etched into my memory. It's a great sounding little synth.
It is. I picked it up used at a synthesizer shop in Brooklyn some years back. I put on the headphones, and like 5 minutes later, an hour went by, and I'm like, "Whoa!" Just got lost in it.
It's one of those synths.
It's also a little broken in very magical ways, where those faders, like for the filter, it's not a knob, it's like a fader, and really like old, funny fader. And underneath it, there was some sort of foam that disintegrated over time and gets in there. So when you slide the fader, it starts, it makes all these like pops. It comes on and off, almost glitchy, but it's a nice broken. It's like a person with a couple scars on them or something.
Brian Eno has actually commented directly about that. That broken synths are the coolest because they are the only synths that sound as that kind of unique. So he knows. So whenever something, this is hearsay in an old interview with him, but I seem to recall him saying that whenever one of his synths breaks, he never has it repaired because it makes it even more special. Back to the faders on that. I do want to talk about the faders as a user interface tool. I far prefer faders to knobs.
In all situations.
I haven't found a situation where I prefer. I guess. Let's talk about the Jupiter 8. Are you like how can you remember the Jupiter 8 with any clarity? Out of curiosity,
only from pictures. I might have seen one once, but I wasn't allowed to touch it.
Yeah,
I'm gonna pull up a picture so I can look at it while you talk. Oh, it's glorious.
Look at all those faders.
Yeah.
The only place you're going to see a knob is for some people really like knobs for tuning. And just because it's somehow a slightly more natural motion. So on hardware, I guess that would be an exception. And they're also, because of the fact that the hardware knobs that are in this, that when you're buying parts from the supply chain, the hardware knobs, it's hard to find a fader that clicks into place, so they're really good for waveform selection.
Hmm.
But in terms of like quick sound design, I'm a big fan of faders. Big fan of faders. That's why you'll see them on ADSRs all the time. When the rest of the synth may be covered in knobs, I think the Roland System 8 is a really good example of that. The rest of the synth may be covered in knobs, but the ADSRs are almost always faders.
Right. I noticed it in my like live performances with I usually have the APC 40,
Hmm.
which has knobs on the top and faders for your volume, and
Hmm.
push as well. Trying to do volume on knobs, like for tracks, is just, you can't be smooth. You got to stop and continue stopping it. Fader, you can real quick up and down, and it's a nice visual. So
Hmm.
I
You
love
can
it
see where the level is at all times.
always.
You
Yeah.
know, you always have a visual reference for what that what the value is for that parameter if you're using a
Mm.
phaser. So that's another reason I like them.
Yeah. It definitely makes it a lot easier to do things fast and smooth without having to pause to readjust your hand. And you can
There are
do
DJs.
multiple at the same time. You can move like 5 faders at the same
Yeah,
time.
you have
One
10,
hand. Yeah.
you have 4 useful fingers for that sort of thing. I don't know, moving a fader with your thumb might not be as much fun, but
Huh.
yeah, you can do a lot of really, really mixing boards. That's one, like
Mm.
how, when people, big mixing consoles. I don't know. I just like, I just have a strong preference for faders wherever possible.
Mm.
So,
Well, my concert mate faders have some kind of disintegrated foam inside them, and it always interrupts the path. But it's character, That's why I got an old synth. I want the character and the personality. I mean, I already have ones that are pristine and perfect inside the computer. The digital stuff. I think we were speaking about that on the phone recently when you were talking about whether to get an analog or a digital synth, and your synopsis was basically if you're gonna get a digital, that's you have it in the computer. You've got the exact replica. Get a good MIDI
that's
controller.
like in my own rig, it's like there are a few things that are digital, like the System 8, which I love because Roland did such a fantastic job modeling their. My glasses keep switching. Sorry. They did a fantastic job modeling the behavior, and they just released the Jupiter 4. I just worked on that, and now I can just push a button and have like a Jupiter 8, Jupiter 4, Juno 106, Juno 60, and they really nailed it. And back
Mm.
to the whole vintage thing, they also put a parameter that's a little bit, it's buried in the settings called condition. And you can get the tuning to be a little wonky and add a little bit more noise. And it was a really well designed, the way Roland Cloud interacts with the System 8 specifically, as well as the stuff in the Phantoms and the Jupiter X. But I really like the Roland Cloud's relationship with the System 8 because they're modeling on as it transfers over to the hardware
Mm.
is really, 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 really on point. And it's got way more knobs, so,
Mm.
and faders.
Yeah. I love those kind of controls. The Prophet has the vintage.
Hmm.
I mean, that is just
Yeah, that's exactly right. Exactly. The
it just
vintage
changes
knob.
everything. There was originally slop, which I'm not sure, but I think it was more had to do with just the tuning. But
Hmm.
now when you switch to the vintage mode, you can still have both options, which is great too. The vintage changes the timing on envelopes, filter positions, like everything just gets inconsistent. I love it. I mean, that's what
It's
I'm always
really
programming into my own design, like some little bit of chaos in there.
well. That's a really good point. And that's a lot. I had a conversation years ago with Steve Duda, and he commented, and this was really insightful, and it stuck with me. This was like 8 years ago. He commented that a lot of what people associate with analog isn't just chaos; it's out of tuneness. Because if you think about old vintage analog synths, if they are truly analog and using control voltages, the standard is 1 volt per octave. But you never get 1 volt per octave. You might get 0.998 volts per octave, so it's always going to be flat. Or it might be a little hot, so it might be 1.023 per octave. And those inconsistent, the fact that you can play, like my Arturia Mini Brute was brutal with this, is you'd go up by octaves, and it just wasn't. I mean, there's a trim pot in the back that I just never messed around with. I think it can be fixed, but it would just go out of tune as you'd go up octaves, and the reason was because that it wasn't true. It's very, unless you're working digitally, getting 1 volt per octave is almost impossible. So that's part of the analog sound.
Well, this is a problem I ran into when I first started trying to combine my guitar with synthesizer sounds, which at that time were all in the computer. My real first, I've been around some synthesizers, but I didn't really understand how they worked. But once I got a computer it was like Pro Tools, and you start playing around with some of the things in there, those were my first experiences. And I just had this thing where I could not get them to sound like they were in the same world. The guitar and the synth just sounded like different universes next to each other instead of one world that I'm trying to make into a song. And what I started to realize was that these synths are in perfect tune, every single note, and my guitar's never in perfect tune. No matter how much I use my tuner and try to get that little green dot to stay in the middle, it's always kind of wobbling a little bit. Just by the nature of hitting the string, you're changing the tension.
That's the thing. That's, I think, one of the attractions for live music and guitar based bands. Again, people like things that sound organic and out of tune. It's just, but they don't realize it. They would, you would think that things would be really precise. That people would like that better, but I think that's why a lot of people refer to synths as sounding cold. A lot of sort of like guitar band purists will say that synths sound cold, and I think it's that tuning thing. Whereas like if you're in a guitar band, unless you have a guitar tech constantly tuning your guitar for every song, or you're switching guitars, if you're just a band playing in a club, by the end of the set, chances are everybody is out of tune with everybody else. And at the opposite spectrum, I ran into a major problem when it was back when I was doing a lot of remixes. It didn't occur to me. This was like a real like life lesson for me. Was I did a track and I was using operator, and I did the intervals using the coarse tuning knobs. So I was tuning these intervals to be perfectly harmonically in tune, thinking that's going to have a really cool sound, and it did have a really cool sound. But then I wanted to add my profit, my profit 08. I wanted to add it, and it just wasn't in tune with the track. And I was like, how can it not be in tune with the track? I'm using operator as perfectly in it. Then it finally occurred to me that because I was using harmonic intervals, they were so precise that I couldn't add any other instruments. So I ended up doing the entire track in operator. So
now, would that mean that would be more mathematic, and our tuning is, now that we're equal tempered, or
12-tone equal temperament is such a compromise that some keys every key is going to sound different because they're equally divided. And it's like, I mean, without getting into the music theory and the math of it all, that's why a lot of people gravitate towards microtonal scales, because you can create these scales that are harmonically perfectly in tune. But ET12, even on an electronic instrument, is always going to be a compromise. Always going to be a compromise. compromise. And orchestras, when orchestras play, many, I don't know what number of players, actually pay attention to that. When you're playing a violin, you can, you have really tight control over, because it's fretless.
Yeah.
You have really tight control over the tuning, and apparently that's a desirable quality to have, a violinist who can really, really stay in tune with the key of the piece in question. Yeah, I think somebody like Ethan Hine would probably be able to speak to that better than I could. But
right, yeah, that's interesting. And I'm so thankful for frets on my guitar. But all of those things were major surprises to me when I started doing things in the computer. It was the tuning. Once that got perfect, it was like, wait, and then the timing was perfect. I finally had everything that I was struggling to get towards, and it's like you want to get close to it, but you never want to really get there, because then all of a sudden it just falls cold and flat and lifeless, like you said. There's this weird threshold. If you go too out of tune, it's a problem. But if there's a sweet spot. The timing and tuning has to be off in just the right way.
Yeah, that's what the vintage knob is for.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited, and I haven't played with it too much yet, but Ableton just released a pack that has a micro tuning. It's a Max for Live device for micro tuning. And I want to just sort of put that on almost everything and just have it the slight, 5 to 10 cent detune on every note.
This is actually a really interesting story about the Korg monologue. Excuse me. The Korg monologue, Aphex Twin, Richard James, was involved on some degree with that. And he actually did the tuning for his SH-101 and made that, because the monologue can do micro tuning, made that for his, I think it's for his own use, but made that as a template so that he could model the inconsistencies of the tuning with that. So yeah, I would strongly encourage you to play with that, because you're going to be able to dial in something that's uniquely you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want it to be obvious, but I want to just get that feel of
do a few cents. I would say so. Anybody out there who's listening and is an Ableton fan and is familiar with this, just don't go wild with it unless you're really trying to be exotic. But that's the thing is, just if you've got 12 tone, pick a 12 tone ET scale, so 12 notes, the one you're all familiar with, and then just take each note and offset it, not by a lot. We're talking less than 5 cents in either direction. And you want it to be more of a feel than a distraction. You want it to be vibes. So.
Yeah, to the point where you almost don't even hear it. You just sense
it just adds a certain something to the track.
Yeah, because that's guitar. I mean, the most well set up guitar is just going to have inconsistencies, day by day, room by room, temperature factors that.
And all your strings are going to be out of tune by a different amount. So it's not even like they shift sharp or flat or anything like that. It's like they're all going in different directions.
Yeah. But that was the breakthrough for me, where I was able to finally make my guitars and synths work together, was realizing that that's the real issue here, is when one thing is so perfect, it makes everything sound weird against it. I guess that's what you had with the...
Yeah. So you just make everything equally out of tune.
Yeah, just ruin everything.
It adds a vibe. It's like, that's why people like super saws. I mean, if you look at a super saw, it's a knob, and they're all getting the tuning is getting further. You can see it clearly in Serum. The tuning is getting further and further apart. People like out of tune stuff. The super saw is the super saw is probably, and the sine wave are probably tied for most popular sounds in electronic music. I say the super saw because everybody's using them for stabs, I say the sine wave because that's what an 808 kick ultimately is. Is a sine wave with a little bit of distortion and a really hard attack. Like if you look at the waveform, if you look at the waveform for an 808 kick sample, it's almost a perfect sine after it gets rid of that like scrunchy, springy stuff at the beginning, which is the attack.
Yeah, I love Operator's default. It's just a sine wave as a sub bass. That
there's a new default. Are you talking about the 11 default or the 10 default? Because we can open a can of worms here.
All right. I'm not aware of a difference. So I've been doing that for ages. So I guess we're going back.
In Live 11, it surprised me. They changed the default for Operator. And I guess it makes sense if you're going for a certain kind of sound. But the Operator envelopes, as I recall, were all just, full sustain. No decay. The sustain was like, and now they have, and I learned it when I realized this when I was teaching a class, because I was teaching a class in Live 10, and several of the students had upgraded to a Live 11. Longer story that I don't have time to get into, but the students were saying, no, that's not the default preset we have. And what they did is they put little decays on a bunch of the operators.
Yeah, I noticed that is the case on B, C, D. So A, I think, is still. Yeah. But I didn't know this. I didn't know that was any different because
I'm pretty sure BC. I guess I could go in the other room and get my Live 10 laptop. But they used to all be full value. Now, this is a really important point because it operates under the assumption that everybody is going to use FM for plucky sounds that have strong attacks. Whereas if you get into dubstep, which, the noisiest stuff, the early Skrillex stuff, did involve a fair amount of operator. And so if you want to make a dubstep bass sound, because you could very easily make a dubstep bass sound and operator in the older versions, because you would just adjust the tuning and the levels and the waveforms for each of that stack in the default algorithm, because it comes with a default stack. So you grab that stack and then you just start turning it. It's very easy to experiment with. You start just turn the knobs, change the coarse tunings and all that. And if you modulate it with the LFO in operator, just modulate the value of certain knobs, you instantly get dubstep bass. But if you do it with the new default preset, you get a very plucky dubstep bass, and it sounds less real. So in an interesting way, the default preset for operator sort of led to a strong aspect of the earliest dubstep wubs, because of the fact that all the envelopes were at full scale. And as a sound designer, it's like, I will change my envelopes. Thank you very much. So having them all come up at full sustain makes a lot of sense. I guess if you think of FM as a pluck based or a pluck oriented type of synthesis, then those absolutely make sense. But FM has been such a big part of so many different kinds of synthesis, or so many different kinds of music, that dubstep requires full sustain. And if you want to make a DX7 electric piano or marimba, sure, then a pluck envelope is the way to go. So I just thought it was an interesting design choice for 11.
Perhaps the folks in Berlin got tired of all that dubstep.
I guess.
We got to do something about this.
My kids still ask for it. My kids in the classes that I teach still want to know how to do the wubs. So
I think it's a very fascinating kind of synthesis. I was never really into dubstep music, but when I heard it, I was like, how did they do that? What is that? I wanted to know, how did you make that crazy noise? So I learned a lot about synthesis from that at the time.
Well, it started in FM and then it moved over to Serum. Serum's like how a lot of people are doing their webs now. I mean, like ever since Serum came out, it was very optimized for webbiness and very, very hard kind of aggressive sounds. And I think that Serum, sure, that's, people identify that as a part of Serum, but whenever I do a pack for Serum, I have like 4 packs in the Xfer store. Whenever I do a pack for Serum, I'm always trying to make it sound as different as people expect it to sound, because it's fantastic for pads. It's really good for cinematic stuff. It's really good for ambient stuff. I did that tone paper thing with that. It's just so much more than just the sort of nail in the ear aggressive sound. So whenever I do a pack, if you're a Serum owner and you want to hear what it can really do, go get one of my packs.
Is that the new pack that's out? Maybe this is a good time to...
Oh no, actually there's some of that in there. I did I just released a pack today, and it's going to be free forever. As a sound designer, I'm aware of other sound designers, and there's a new generation coming up, and some of them are, really resonate with the kind of work I like to do. And there's this guy in the UK called Tom Wolfe, and he does a lot of cinematic stuff, and that's sort of his brand is around these sort of like, majestic cinematic kind of soundscapey sort of things. And I really liked his work. So I just shot him an email and said, hey, do you want to collaborate on a pack? Just 10 sounds. So, and I was like, and he was like, that's a cool idea. And I don't know of any other sound designer who said, hey, let's do a collab. So I figured, okay, well, I'll do that. So I reached out to him, and he immediately said yes, which made me very happy, because I like his work. He's familiar with mine. And he was like, how do you want to do this? And I was like, well, one of us will start the presets and the other person will finish them, or we'll go back and forth, or, we'll each create 5. And that's ultimately how we ended up doing it. He sent me 10 presets, and then I did my little Francis magic on it. And they're a really cool mixed bag. They're available on his synthvault.net. So synthvault is his name of his company, .net. If you go there, you can get this free Serum pack that's got 10 sounds in it. He's got a lot of free stuff on his website for other synths too. But he's very gifted, and I think it resonates with the fact that I'm a college professor, and I work with a lot of younger people, some of whom are just real naturals, and really going. There's a student, a former student of mine. A lot of former students of mine have gone places. Like Hunter Pierce is a recent former student of mine. Adrian Benavides is now touring with a million different bands, doing Ableton backline. Edward Braliff, personal friend of mine, and also he has a few presets in the Serum, the original Serum Factory banks. But it's just I'm so used to working with younger people, and I know I'm not immortal, and I know I rather than being really territorial about my career, I'd rather be honest about the fact that I'm not immortal. So there's going to be a new wave. And since I have such great relationships with my students, I thought, well, why don't I start working with some of these younger sound designers just to see what happens, just as a pure experiment. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But with Tom and this new pack on his website, I'm letting him distribute it. With that pack, it was a really fun opportunity. And I'm not aware of any other packs out there where sound designers have collaborated, but it was really fun, and I'm really glad I did it. And he seems to like it too. He's a really nice guy. So
that's cool, and I think that's a great attitude to have too. What's the sense in getting too territorial? I suppose I think especially for you, you're a top guy in high demand. I think that's just the way it's going to be. And it's really cool that you're opening that up. First of all, all your teachings are great, with the university, with what you do online. It's nice that you're sharing that. You're having this conversation with me. I'm learning a ton. And that spirit is just really nice. And I would imagine, if it has taught me anything, is that when you start doing that, you learn a lot yourself, and you grow a lot. And I know when I started sharing like things I learned how to do, it made me feel like I have to figure out more things to do now.
I've said those very words. You are 100% correct. That's a great point. because what'll happen is if you keep your bag of tricks just to yourself, especially in the synth world where every preset is open source. I mean, you can look at the parameters, but if you keep all your tricks to yourself, then as people discover them on their own through their own experimentation, you start losing your bag of tricks. So I'm always giving away my bag of tricks, like the tuning and the analog stuff and stuff like that. I'm always giving away my bag of tricks for the simple reason that it forces me to continue to be creative and to not just, lean back on a bunch of tropes, I guess. So yeah, that's a fantastic point.
Right? Yeah, you get like you start guarding things and they become precious.
Yeah.
And I think it also psychologically makes you feel like the only reason I'm here is because of this thing I figured out that no one knows yet. And that takes away from your own self confidence and worth. And I think on that subconscious level, it just makes you feel like I'm nothing besides this fun thing I discovered.
Yeah. This is also big in the DJ scene until Shazam came along. Where DJs just wouldn't tell you what tracks they're playing. I knew a DJ back in the vinyl days who would literally they had these little like coasters you could put on top of the record label so that if somebody came into the DJ booth, they didn't know. And I was like, that's I developed a new and different opinion of that particular DJ because of it. But in CDJs and laptops, I'll say, what track is this or whatever. Especially if it was a DJ that maybe I didn't know, but I was like I admired. I'd be like, what track is this? This is really good. And they were like, oh, I'm sorry, it's I can't I don't want to tell you. I was like, oh my God, that track is going to be that track. No one is going to care about that track in 6 months because dance music is fashion you can hear. So, it's so it's true. I mean, it's like, that's not to take anything away from the artist, but what you're doing is you're creating a toolkit for DJs to tell a story. And this point really was driven home to me when Paul Oakenfold's seminal, like the record that created the superstar DJ it was an album by Paul Oakenfold in 1999 called Transport. And because it created the superstar DJ phenomenon like Tiesto and those sorts of things. And it was called Transport and it was labeled Paul Oakenfold. And if you looked at the track listing, you would see the actual artist's name and song title's name. Yet the masses just didn't want to do the research. They never looked at the liner notes. I couldn't figure out what it was, but everybody thought it was a Paul Oakenfold record. I think there are people still to this day who think that Paul Oakenfold did all the music on Transport. And it just wasn't the case. So but what happens with dance music, and I talked about this in my book I did 15 years ago. It's terribly dated now, but there's some nuggets in there. Like with regards to dance music, it's a track will be popular and or fashionable for, or a sound, a genre, dubstep being a really good example where it sort of comes and goes. Classic house is always sort of like, it's cycled so many times it's just become part of the fabric of what we call dance music. Is a sound becomes really popular and then it falls off because it's replaced by another sound, another genre. And then that genre becomes popular and it gets to the point where if people play the previous genre, they'll be like, that's so tired. And that's what people do with fashion. And then that previous genre kind of goes into hibernation in the same way that fashion, let's keep using the fashion analogy, in the same way that people take their old clothes to vintage shops. And then there are new people who go to the vintage shops and go, that's cool, funky. Like I like those jorts or those cargo shorts or that fanny pack or whatever. And then they drag it out of the dumpster, polish it up a little bit, and it's a new genre. So the cycles of fashion and the cycles of dance music are so closely related.
Dance
and
music is fashion you can
it's
hear.
fashion you can hear.
It's true. Well, I was fascinated just how many genres there were when I first started hearing any of it. I was like,
Right. And people are
and
really nitpicky, and then the genres cross pollinate, and you'll hear
mm,
like, oh, that's like dark German, big room techno,
mm,
and I'm like, that's too many adjectives, man.
yeah.
So
Well, and look, like rock music has its own formulas and things like that. But I was always surprised when I'd see people teaching you how to make like this specific genre, how down to like the bar everything is. It's 8 bars, then this, then this, and this. It was like you just don't. You might talk about rock music and pop music, verse, chorus, bridge, solo, or something, but not to that degree. It was always this is the drop, this is the build, this is bizarrely formulaic. But I think maybe there's just so much. I don't know. People maybe kidding themselves about how different they think the
I
genres are from each other.
I think it's the difference between somebody who cooks from a recipe book versus somebody who's a chef. Chefs don't cook from recipe books. Chefs are like that, chefs mix and match cuisines. And it's like garlic works across a bunch of different cuisines. This is kind of like my Ableton loop talk, where, there are a lot of cooking analogies, but that's, if you're just using a recipe, it's sort of, kind of anybody can make that cake. You can buy templates for genres where if where all you do is change the notes,
Hmm.
maybe
Yeah.
maybe move the hi-hats around and then put your name on it. And I'm like, okay, I don't know
Hmm.
how much creative satisfaction I would get from that process.
Right. Probably
So
turn out a lot of tracks that way, though.
you turn out a lot of tracks. You get to play Ibiza. You do all like and to be specific with some artists, what happens is they come up with their own recipe that everybody else tries to figure out and tries to copy and that sort of thing. But they come up with their own recipe and then they stick with it, and then that's their sound. So I think that for me is the motivation to be as original as possible. Case in point, Dead Mouse. I mean, like, you can't really talk about dance music without talking about Dead Mouse at some point. So, but he's got that sound. It's his recipe. If anybody does that recipe, Dead Mouse gets a free ad because people go, "Oh, that sounds like Dead Mouse," which means that no one knows who you are. You're still anonymous based on the fact that everybody's going to mistake you for somebody far more famous. And I don't know that would be, I don't know that that's the path to a longevity as an artist.
Hmm.
The path to longevity as an artist is to find your own sound and make sure your engineering and your grooves and your beats and your sounds are totally on point, and let everybody copy you. That way,
Hmm.
every time somebody copies you, they're an ad for your sound, not
Hmm.
the other way around.
Hmm. I never thought
So
about it that way. An ad for Dead Mouse.
yeah,
It's true.
if you make a track that's a rip off of Dead Mouse's vibe, then you're just an advertisement for Dead Mouse.
Yeah.
Back when I was a DJ, I can rattle off. Only because I was a DJ, I could rattle off a list of tracks that people thought were Dead Mouse. So I'll spare the guilty. Um, but at the same time, there were a bunch of tracks in 2000. I want to say like 2007 to 2009, where it was just people trying to sound like Dead Mouse.
I find it really funny that DJs would be so protective over what they're playing because I always kind of thought that was the point of the DJ was to like kind of show you this is something cool you might not have heard yet. This is something I have this ear. I can find these things and I can put them together in this way. And I'll show you some new stuff.
I fully agree with that statement. However, that's not the way the world works.
Maybe it's the advent of the superstar DJ that
Yeah.
it's bigger than the medium almost.
Well, Shazam is. I mean, unless they're getting promo copies, a month before the track actually drops, you can Shazam them now, and I
Yeah.
think that's sort of maybe democratized it a little bit more.
Yeah, well, that's good. I think. I think Shazam's cool.
I'm a college professor. I
Yeah.
naturally want to share my knowledge. You're a teacher as well. You naturally want to share your knowledge. There are just some people who just naturally want to give. There's a great book a friend of mine gave me a few years ago called The Go Giver, and it's a really good book. It's a little bit of it's kind of self-helpy. It's like kind of like the the four something or others, or the anyway, it's a philosophical book that sort of has builds a really strong case for giving and helping, as opposed to being stingy with your resources and knowledge. And yeah, it's called The Go Giver. Hang on, I'm gonna go get it because it's a good book. It's called The Go Giver, and it's by Bob Berg and John David Mann, and it looks like this. I hope that's not backwards.
No, it's not. I'm gonna put that in the show notes for everybody if you're listening.
Yeah, it's a great book, and it's you generate more goodwill that way. You're making the world a better place, and trust me, this world could be a better place.
Yeah.
So,
well, that I agree. Like, that's a really cool thing. I'd like to check that out just to reinforce that, because I think when you give, you ultimately, you can almost do it in a selfish way because you will get back. But to assume, just because you're a teacher means you're a giver, I have to disagree. It's not. That's not the way it is for everybody that's a teacher. Because I know teachers that, even though their goal is to make smarter students and help students learn and all of that, they won't share their materials with other teachers. There's most teachers, you say, hey, that's a cool lesson. Like, can I see what you're doing there? Can I show that? Can I borrow that? They're like, oh yeah, of course. But there are other people that will watermark their papers or things where, no, you can't have that.
It's the same thing with the DJs covering up the labels.
It is.
It's thinking that you're a one-trick pony. It's like you are literally saying, I'm a one-trick pony, and my trick is so valuable that I'm not going to share it with people. I see. You have a point. I just haven't seen that at my own school. It kind of helps that every professor who teaches electronic music at my school is a former student of mine. But
no way. That's so cool.
Yeah, there are like 5 or 6 teachers in the electronic music department at Austin Community College, and they're all former students of mine.
And that's a leadership thing, though, too. Then, if that's the case with everybody that teaches there, like, that's an example you've set for them that this is what we do. And this is how we go about. I'm sure if you were the opposite, you'd see a lot more of this, covering their work and not letting you. No, you can't watch me do this. And
well, you can't. You'll never fool me. I mean, it's certainly in terms of electronic music. It's just only like I'll figure out what you did. I'll listen. If I can, you'll
deconstruct it. But
if I can figure out a thunderstorm, I can figure out what you just did. So, I don't mean that in an arrogant way. I just mean that it's like it's about, again, it goes back to the sharing.
Well, someone's ultimately going to figure it out.
Someone is going to, it ties in with the collaborate. It's again, collaborating with sound designers or teaching or doing podcasts like these. And I just, the world needs more generosity, and I don't see it. And, now I'm going to get super philosophical. I don't want to spend too much time on the apocalypse, but it would be really, really nice if people would make the first move in generosity. You don't have anything to lose. You really don't. And like you said, which is, again, great point. A lot of times when you give a lot, you can, I guess you could theoretically do it in a selfish way where you generate goodwill, and goodwill is a good thing to have. So by being generous and kind with, and giving with your knowledge, it comes back. It does come back. Absolutely. That's, I've had a 20-year career as a sound designer.
It's
So
in all
comes
of our
back.
best interest to have a
Yes.
world full of nicer, happier, better, more caring people.
Yeah.
So even if you don't want to share, do it in that selfish way of you'll have a better experience ultimately.
Yeah, you appeal to their selfishness. That would be.
This is
Oh,
kind of
I
the
see
means
what
to
you
the
did
end
there.
doesn't really matter case, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
I love what you said, and I've said this to people before, quoting you, that presets are open source. This like way of thinking. Um, every time you get a new synth, a new, especially in the computer where you can really like just look at
Mhm.
everything. Like some synths you get hardware when you load a preset, the knobs don't all show where they are. But when you have it in the computer, like they really, it's open source. It's like every preset is its own little masterclass.
Mhm.
And that's something I've stolen from you and repeated many times
That's
in
not
my
stealing.
classes.
I gave it. I gave it away.
It's true though. It's
I'm
it's a
honored that
great way
you.
to think.
I'm honored that you share that with people. So thank you.
Hmm. Was there anything that sticks out that you learned in the collaboration? Did it change the way you worked in some way, or maybe Tom Wolfe did something in a manner like, oh, I wouldn't have done it that way. Oh, that was surprising.
Uh, I think he's such a good designer that he works in multiple synths. That is another point that was from my Ableton talk that's worth repeating. And this is a cornerstone of how I teach synthesis. Is I teach it in a platform neutral manner, so that even though I may be using Serum or Operator or Phase Plant, I do a lot of stuff in Phase Plant because it's very visual. But Serum is the sort of like Phase Plant. You can imagine anything you can imagine, you can usually do. But with Serum, if you've got work to do, you got to get stuff done. It's Serum. But knowing multiple synthesizers, look at you in your studio that I'm looking at right now with all the different synths you have. You will understand, if you understand how to program them, you understand their relationship to each other, and that a filter is a filter is a filter. When you see a filter knob, you turn the filter knob, you know what to expect. You know what you're going to get. If you turn your attack, decay, sustain, release, you know what you're going to get. But if you're just using presets and you don't familiarize yourself with the synths in your rig and don't focus on the most powerful synths in your rig, like Serum. If you learn Serum inside and out, I guarantee you can get way more than wubs out of it. If you use Operator inside and out, you can get way more than wubs out of it. If you use but learn 2 or 3 synths that are really powerful inside and out. Once you do that, you'll understand every synth. It will all make sense. That's so with regards to the open source thing, that's the by using a few really good synths, you'll have that open source kind of mentality where you can look at a preset and go, oh, they set that envelope up that way and they got a pluck, or they set that envelope up that way and they got a pad, or the filter cutoff. I had a student. A lot of times I'll reverse engineer sounds for students. I have like a class that's just dedicated to them bringing in YouTube videos of tracks, and I'll listen to them and I'll say, timestamp the sound that you want, and then I'll recreate that sound for them in real time. And one semester, a student brought in several different YouTube tracks, and I was like, oh, you just like really low cutoff frequencies on a low pass filter, because they liked all these very muted sounds. So go figure, so you're going to like your own sounds more if you just dial back your cutoff frequency, because that's the thing you like about the sounds you like. Mm-hmm. So it's just, yeah. So I don't know if that was too much of a derail from your question, but that's kind of my aesthetic on that.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I almost don't even remember what I said. What I say about ask you about learning from each other.
That's the beauty of podcasts. They wander all over the place.
They do. That's why we don't have formatted questions on this one. But you're making me think a bit about your Watch and Learn series.
Oh yeah,
that you did on YouTube, which is really awesome series.
Thank you for bringing that up. I honestly don't think that got the wave of attention that it deserved.
what I really like about it, for one, they're nice and short, right? So
Yes.
it in the fact that you're doing all the sound design in a minute or two, they're just a couple minutes.
Mm-hmm.
It's empowering, one, because you can see like, hey, this really interesting sound that I love is constructed in a couple minutes if you know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes seconds, really. It's fun to watch you work. You just go right for it and boom, boom, boom. Here we go. And there's a sound. I like that you also do it on different synths. So you might do,
That
I
was
think, like
important.
the sub kick, 808 sound you do on Operator. I think you do it on a couple others as
Did it in
well.
a bunch of different sense. Yeah.
So that it proves, for one, it's not like you need that one. You need this one. You need that one. You need to know how they work, which is what you're saying.
Thanks
But
for reminding me that I did that, because I totally forgot that I did them that way. But yeah, and I also gave everybody the presets. A, because there are people who like instant gratifications and free presets. But B, because if they load the preset and then watch the video, they'll know exactly. It's like I'm giving you both the cake and the recipe.
Mhm.
So and you can, and in the case of where I did it in several different synths. Thank you for, really seriously, Brian. Thank you for bringing that up. I did it in different synths for that very reason. That was another one of my pandemic things, and that was, I think I mentioned earlier, I had a really talented student, Hunter Pierce, a few years ago. He's the person who gave me the idea, because I was doing one-on-one lessons with him, because he'd completed all my classes and wanted to go further. And he would ask me to do a sound. He's like, if I set a stopwatch, you'd be coming in under 45 seconds. This would be a really cool YouTube series. And I thought, well, yeah, but that would just be flashy if I didn't give them the sound and didn't give them the opportunity to work through it. Again, giving. But yeah, that came out of Hunter's suggestion. He's like, because I work so quickly. Also, I want to talk about, this ties in with my YouTube video, not my channel, but I see a lot of YouTube videos where they're like, they explain something that really only takes 5 minutes to explain, but they explain it over the course of a half hour. So you have no idea where the information is. And you have to watch a bunch of different like Native Instruments ads, or whoever is inserting the ads. And you'll see these you'll have to watch a half hour, and 20 minutes of that half hour is ads, and 10 minutes of it is information that is not succinct or eloquent. There are some really gifted teachers on YouTube, but there's a bunch of influencer crap that I just can't get behind. So that was
I
another
do
reason that I
appreciate
wanted
the
to do that.
directions of how exactly I should smash the like button repeatedly throughout a video.
I started ending my phone calls with that. I've like, so I'll like, instead of saying goodbye, I'll say, don't forget to hit subscribe and like.
That's funny.
That became a running joke between me and a friend of mine. So
it's a great series though, because it does take you through it, and like you said, you give away the thing too. It showcases a bit of the strengths of some of the different synths too.
mm-hmm.
And I think that's cool that you're able to, at all within a minute or so, you're able to show that, hey, it doesn't matter which tool you actually have, because this isn't a matter of what company's device you own. It's a matter of understanding the fundamental building blocks of synthesis.
Mm-hmm.
But there are reasons why we have all of these synthesizers too, because they have certain strengths and certain workflows, and they might get you to certain results faster or have different styles. And it's a bit like, guitars. Like, why do I have like 4 electric guitars?
Yes.
Why do I have
have
all these mono synths here? Because I know when I play that sub fatty, I'm getting something a lot different than the MS-20, and they're both mono. The
MS-20 is versus a sub. That is such a bizarre competition, like not competition, but just like bizarre comparison, because they are really different sounding synths.
They are when you're in our world, But if I took somebody that didn't know anything about it, they'd be like, so they're the same thing?
No, the MS-20 is just mean sounding.
Yeah, well, that's the
Really,
character of it, you know. That's that's.
yeah.
But it's we could still do so many of the same things on the two synths.
You
You get,
can. You can.
but we can also branch off in these like other suburbs
Well,
that
I really liked your example with guitars. That's a really great point too. That you've got, ask any guitarist who's been playing for a while and has gotten bitten by the sort of collection thing that synth nerds have. Guitarists have it too. They've got a Les Paul, and they've got a Stratocaster, and then they've got a Telecaster, and then they've got a hollow body, and then they've got an acoustic, and then the next thing you know, they're the same as they're just as much gear nerds. It's just their gear is mechanical and ours is electronic. But it's the same, collector mentality. And there's a reason for it, because each of those guitars, having recorded them and worked with guitarists, I know that each of those guitars have a sound. If you want to sound like Chic, you get your Stratocaster. If you want to sound like Stevie Ray Vaughan, you get your Les Paul. Is it Les Paul?
No, I think he's a Strat as well.
Is he a Strat player? Strats, I always think Chic. I always think Strats are like Chic. That's the Chic preset, is getting a Stratocaster. I didn't know that. Learned something new. But yeah, guitars aren't my wheelhouse, but I do understand
Slash,
them.
we'll say, or
the Flying V. I'll get my Flying V. And it's also, and guitarists are nerds about pedals. Like Edward Braliff, my buddy, just got this one that's like a plasma tube distortion. There's like, it's like this weird, like this. I'm like, you just spent a fortune on the pedal, but I'm like, I get it. I get it because I'm a synth. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, I'm always kind of reminded of an old Calvin and Hobbes comic, like a little gag in there with Calvin. He is reading Chewing Gum magazine, and really, I read an interview. Maybe it was in one of his books. Bill Watterson wrote like his Chewing Gum magazine is his sort of poking fun at how nerdy everybody gets about their hobbies, and like Calvin's reading the comic about how like this particular gum's the density of the chew helps build the chewer's jaw, and this is that all these like funny little details. Like it's the same thing except just a little bit of absurdity.
Is this the part where I tell you I'm a chewing gum nerd?
Is it?
Yes. Yeah, I like there's some fantastic exotic stuff. Like right now I've got Nicorette, so that I'm not being a vape bro on this. But there's an amazing Japanese gum called Black, BLACK, and the stick of gum itself is black. And it's hyper minty, like super, like overwhelmingly minty, but it's caffeinated.
Whoa.
So I always have a pack of black in my little my fanny pack, my man bag, and my Fran bag. And then there's another gum that was made in the 40s, maybe even earlier. I always call it Choward's, but it might be C. Howard's. I'm not sure, but it's violet flavored, and it literally has this strange violet flavor that's impossible to duplicate. There's an old gum from the 60s that my aunt and I both adore. She sent me like a case of them like 15 years ago. I still have 2 of them. They're probably all brittle and I don't know if they're stale. I might want to open one up. But I was being really precious about it, called Tea Berry. I have no idea what that flavor is, but it's the only gum flavor I've ever tasted that tastes. It's called TEABERRY, and I believe the manufacturer was Clark's. They also made a black colored gum called Blackjack, but that was licorice. And the third that they made a clove gum that was clove flavored, and they also made one called Beeman's that was pepsin flavored. So
Pepsin, like the
Pepsin, PEP. Cin.
Oh, okay.
It's a weird mint and licorice adjacent flavored. If you're okay, at this point in time, you can stop hitting the fast forward by 15 seconds. Message to the audience there. But
No, this is a
I'm
beautiful
done
moment
talking about
where
gum.
the satire has become reality right before my eyes.
I am the editor and publisher of Chewing Gum Magazine. So
Look at that.
there was Freshen Up. There was I think it was called Freshen Up gum in the 70s. And it actually the slogan was, it was the gum that goes squirt. And the slogan was actually "Love that squirt." I swear to God, you can find it on YouTube. But it was called Freshen Up gum, and it was a chewing gum. It usually came in like breath freshening, kind of like spearmint, peppermint, and cinnamon. But in the center of it was a liquid. God knows what that liquid was. But in the center of it, there was a liquid that was an enhanced, like an even stronger version of that flavor.
Yeah,
it was called Freshen Up gum.
I do remember that.
Juicy fruit gum is we're almost done. I'll leave. This is my last gum tip. Juicy fruit gum is actually based on the flavor of jackfruit. So if you ever see jackfruit is very difficult fruit to deal with, but juicy fruit gum is like, whenever it's like, what's the flavor of juicy fruit? It's jackfruit. It's not like some melange of peach, apple, pear, etc. It's actually a specific fruit called jackfruit. Chewing Gum Magazine.
Yeah.
Latest issue on in stores now.
That's happening too often with satire becoming reality these days. This is harmless, though.
This is harmless. Yeah. That ties in with a different sort of observation about society. We need to stop dreaming of dystopias. We've been dreaming of dystopias in our media and many of our games for over 20 years now. I want to say that, it's like every dystopian movie has come to pass. Seriously. Every time somebody dreams of a dystopia, we make it. We need to start thinking more in terms of Star Trek and utopias and places where there's diversity and people strive to be the best people that they can be. That's really good science fiction. But science fiction like, say Soylent Green, which came out in 1972 and is about climate change, or The Matrix, which is about Facebook's new product, the metaverse. There's like there's so many. I almost feel like we use certain types of fiction and science fiction. 1984, anyone? We use certain types of science fiction as the basis. Like, remember when flip phones came out? That's all Star Trek. There's so much stuff, so much technology that's here right now because of Star Trek, which is an optimistic, highly diverse universe. But things like The Matrix or Soylent Green, or like, just if you go through all this dystopian sci-fi, we keep creating it. We've got to be. We almost as now I'm going to get really woo, so I apologize. But I do feel like we need to start dreaming of positivity instead of negativity in our media, in our storytelling.
I do think there's truth to that. I mean, you find what you look for. You see. I always do an exercise with my classes where I'll say, like, look for something red in the room. And like suddenly when you get in that mindset, red sticks out. Well, look for green, and then you see green things. It'll point out green things. It's like, I think that's a lot your mind too. Look for things that piss you off. You'll find them. Look for things to be grateful for. Just the fact that you have the opportunity to look for things that you're grateful for is nice.
I begin every day with a gratitude exercise. And it's like, it's right after I open my eyes. I don't say every day, but I try to remember to every day. When I open my eyes, I'm like, well, thank God I can open my eyes, or thank whoever, whatever. Or I say, and then I think, I like my bedroom. and then, and it's like, it's not like it's opulent. I don't live, in hyper luxurious, surroundings, but I spend like a good 2 or 3 minutes being grateful for the fact that I just woke up into a life that I enjoy. Mm-hmm. And and I worked really hard to get that life, and everybody can have a life that they enjoy if they work for it. I mean, there's a certain amount of, you've got to create, like you were just saying, you have to manifest the life you want. No one's going to give it to you. So but when you do get it, don't take it for granted. There are too many people who take their good fortune for granted. And I do think that if people were a little bit more grateful, that would be another step in the right direction. Gosh, we're not talking about synthesizers anymore, are we? So.
Oh yeah. What is the name of the show?
Yeah. Music Production Podcast. Chewing Gum Magazine is what the name of the show is.
I'm going to have a lot of fun with the subtitles on this one. You know what, though? It's important because if you are in the position of, the fortunate position of being able to noodle with a synthesizer, make a song, by default, a lot of things have gone right in your life. You're very fortunate, and there's a lot to be thankful for. And it wouldn't take removing too many things for you to wish that you were back where you are today.
Yes. I mean, and to the people out there who, yes, I did play with the Prophet 5 in a music store when I was 12. I had a grandmother who would take me to the music store. But I also worked in a deli slicing meat. God, that was terrible. So I'm always really nice when I go to when I get a quarter pound of turkey or half pound of roast beef or something like that. I am so nice to them because I've had that job. Mm-hmm. You'll find people in any service industry. I worked in restaurants. I was a host at a restaurant. I was a security guard in an art gallery. I was a secretary. My first job when I moved to Austin was to be an administrative assistant at IBM. I needed a job. I needed to pay my bills immediately as soon as I landed here. I'd had some successes, but the royalties weren't enough for me to get an apartment. I was only 28 years old. I moved to Austin, and I had to get a job. And the first job I got when I got to Austin was as an administrative assistant at IBM. And from there, I got into web design and graphic design, and that really helped. But I've done the crappy gigs. I have, and and no one helped me get to where I am. Like, once I started doing it, but I'm just saying that first jump from the minimum wage job to actually continuing to pursue my career, I've done the minimum wage work. Mm-hmm. And that's, but I just kept pushing. I kept saying, no, I want to play with synthesizers. I'd rather play with synthesizers. I don't want to work in a deli. I'd rather play with synthesizers. And I just kept pushing. And I think oftentimes, even especially now where it's hard to figure out where to turn, I'm always encouraging my students. I'm like, the minute you give up, you've lost. That's it. If as soon as you give up, you're never going to get what you wanted.
Yeah.
So don't give up.
Don't give up. You never know when that turn in the road is. You can't see more than a few feet ahead of yourself.
Yeah, when I was talking about the first sound design gig I got in Austin was because I went to a pizza party for Game Audio.
What was that?
The Game Audio group in Austin was like somebody said, oh, they're having a pizza party at this pizza joint over on Anderson Lane. You should go. That's how I got my first gig. I met people, and I was friendly.
Was making game music?
No, it was going back to doing the General Midi to go full circle. The General Midi sounds it was I'm pretty sure it was a card made by Emu or Creative. It was rebalancing the sounds to make sure that they sounded compatible with everybody else's. But I got that gig only because I went to a pizza party. And I had to. I can look at all the banana peels I slipped on to get to where I am. Like teaching was just like somebody. I gave a talk at a class, and a teacher canceled at the last minute. and the school called me and said, "Hey, audio engineering, you have like a bunch of records out and stuff. Would you be interested in teaching?" I said, "Just to make it clear, I have never taught before." And they're like, "Yeah, but you gave a talk at the class and the students really liked it. Do you want to give it a shot?" Because the teacher quit at the last minute because his wife was being transferred to a new city, and the school was kind of in a bind. And this is 1995. And they called me and they said, "Would you be interested in teaching?" I said, "Okay." I said, "Sure, okay."
Yeah.
And it was, it's all a bunch of saying yes and making it happen.
Right. That's a story you hear a lot too. Kind of these out of the blue random things that lead to unexpected places, and then you get the call. Well, I don't never taught. I don't know how to do it, but you do it. Or people
Yeah.
will kind of a similar situation is like, "Hey, can you do this for us?" And they say, "Yes, I can," and then they proceeded to learn how to do the thing.
Yes,
so they
yes,
can do it.
that's absolutely the story
Yeah.
of my first 10 years as a professional in Austin. Absolutely.
Is that
It's
you
not
got to have
faking
that.
it.
No, it's the willingness to go into the dark and
Yeah.
figure it out and kind of trust yourself that you're going to do all you can to do it. Other people have figured it out. And if
Mhm.
I put my all in, maybe I'll figure it out too.
And if you can hit a deadline and be easy to work with, you're light years ahead of the competition.
Yes, I've heard it said you need to hit your deadlines. You need to be two of the three, right? You need to either hit the deadlines, be unlikable person,
Yeah.
or do exceptional work. If you get 2 out of 3 of those, you're good.
And if you get so I just basically, I did good work at the beginning of my career. I did good work, but I had the other two. And then after that, I just got more experience. So,
Right. Now you're
yeah.
an asshole to everybody, right?
Yeah, just a jerk. Just a total jerk. Total
Yeah.
jerk.
Well, no, you're the unique package that you're able to have all 3 of those things now. And that's why you're in every synthesizer that comes out.
That's that. Yeah. So how did you do it? That's my strategy. So, and anybody can do it. Anybody can do it. And so you take that strategy. Easy to work with, hit the deadline, and make it happen. Just be good. Just be good enough. And if you can hit the other two, you're good.
The grit.
Yep.
That's good
Yep.
stuff. And it applies to everything. It really does. And I
Yeah.
think
No matter what your art form.
the more you
Yeah.
practice it too, the better you do at all the other things. Before this podcast, just yesterday or the day before, I re-listened to The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, which I
Love that
just,
book.
and it's like
Given it
two and a
so
half
many.
hours to listen to. So you can do it in
Oh,
a
the
day.
audio version. Got it.
Yeah, it's like, and it's him, and he's like, it's kind of funny. It's got like a lot of like military music in the background that kind of like go.
The Star Spangled Banner is playing in the back.
He very much puts this like you're going into battle against resistance every day.
Got it.
And it's when you can conquer it, it's amazing what it does for you. So I'm on fire right now because I just listened to it. So like, I get that done a lot through like working out, just getting some exercise, making myself do something hard and miserable. That I did that now, and like I'm ready.
I've been working out for over 20 years, like exercising, gym stuff, and I don't go to this gym as much as I did pre-pandemic, but I still, whenever we're having a lull in the pandemic, I get back into the gym. But back to your point, working out that's another really great detail. Is I just have every day or 5 days out of the week, I have 15 minutes where I just have to do in that 15 minutes. I just have to do 8 minutes of serious work. And I swear, every time it comes up, I see it on my calendar, I see it coming up, I'm still dreading it. The resistance is totally there. I don't want to do it. But I remind myself that the minute I have completed it, A, it's good for my body and my health. But B, I'm always have like a little burst of, happiness when I'm like, oh, thank God that's out of the way. So yeah.
Oh, it's almost entirely mental.
It really is.
It does You get physical benefits from it, of course, but it's all mental. It's amazing. And I love the idea of mind over matter. And like I didn't want to do that, but it's done. And
Yes.
now what's next? Bring it, you know? You get that
Yes.
kind of like attitude of I
Yes.
just did the hardest thing I'm gonna have to do all day. I love that you do it just for a couple minutes too, because that's what I like. I really like these like super intense.
Super intense, really short.
Yeah.
I do super intense, really short. Based on my watch because I turn it on so I log it. Based on my watch, it's never more than 8 minutes.
Hmm.
It's always just like boom, 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 boom. I get my heart rate up there. I do all that, but it's like it's only 8 minutes. If you can't, it's okay. So is the War of Art where I heard about the 5 minute rule? Do you know about the 5 minute rule?
No,
Oh,
the
all
five
right,
minute
everybody.
rule.
All right, all right. This is a really great.
Buckle it.
Okay, super easy. If you're dreading something that you have to do, like
Hmm.
whether it's for your employer or your partner or yourself, that you have to. It's not. It's you can't delay it. It's something that has to be done. Tell yourself, I'm only going to do it for 5 minutes. If I don't enjoy it after 5 minutes, I can stop.
Hmm.
You never stop.
Hmm.
I think I can count on one hand the amount of times I've stopped.
Hmm.
I've had projects, and I do have resistance. That's why The War of Art is such a great book. Do you have it? Like I like reading, but
Yeah, I've got a physical copy, and I
yeah,
got
The
the
War
audio as
of
well.
Art. So in addition to the Go Giver, go get The War of Art, and then from there, the 5 minute rule is just that whatever you're dreading doing, tell yourself that if you don't enjoy it after 5 minutes, you can stop. And
Hmm.
who can argue with that? If you
Hmm.
can't do something for 5 minutes, get back in bed.
Yeah.
But just say 5 minutes, and I always get on like I get momentum after that 5 minutes,
Hmm.
and then I continue. And it's very rare that I stop. But that's how I always stop putting things off.
Hmm. Yeah, I do similar mental tricks where it's like, all right, all I have to do is like set up something, or I just have to, sit down at the guitar or whatever I'm doing, just that. And because it is the hardest part, I think, is just committing to going into the act. And
I
if you
just
decide
realized.
I have
Yeah, go
three
ahead.
hours I have to work, it's too much. You're gonna put that off. But I can do 5 minutes. I can do a few minutes. I can at least
Yeah.
open it up. I could set up. I could turn on the amp.
With regards to exercise, this cycles back. I just realized that I never tell anybody that I do this. I think I've told like two or three people in my entire life. When I'm working out, when you exercise, do you do things that have like reps and sets?
Yeah, sort of. Sometimes I mix it up.
So instead of doing 10, I do two sets of five one after the other. So I go one,
Hmm.
two, three, four, five, two, two, three, four, five. So my brain is only going, you only have to do five
Hmm.
twice. And by tricking my brain rather than like, oh my God, 8, 9, 10, then it's like, once I started breaking it up so that I was only counting to five if I wanted to do 10 of whatever it was, push-ups. Let's just say it's push-ups. You want to do 10 push-ups. Just do 5 push-ups twice.
Hmm.
And you're tricking your brain into thinking there's not that much left to go, when in
Hmm.
fact you still did 10.
My old martial arts instructor would have us do, if it was 5 or 10 or whatever, we do 10 and then we count down from 10 because it, only three left, only two left, only one left.
Oh, right, right, right.
And
Yeah.
it was so much easier than doing 20, you know, to go up to 10 and then down from 10.
Oh,
But
I
to,
like that better than my trick.
yeah,
I'm
it's the
gonna I'm
same
gonna
thing
try
really,
that.
but
Yeah,
like you,
yeah.
you count down on the second half and it feels like you don't have as much. It's the same thing. It's no different, but again, it's because it's so mental. You're
So
really
much of
just
yeah.
you're training your mind more than anything.
So much about achievement is that you've managed to sort of hack your bad habits.
Yes, it is a hack.
These are
It's like
all ways to hack your bad habits and be more
mental
productive.
gymnastics, hacking, tricking yourself. Ah, just 5 minutes. It's so
Yeah.
true with like stuff like this music because it's fun, and I mean we've we've chosen it because we love it. There's if you're doing it for the money, like there's a lot a lot of much
Oh,
safer
yeah, it's
bets.
wrong field.
Pick
Yeah.
something that's a much safer bet and go do that. But still, it's hard to get started. There's all that resistance, the fear, the uncertainty, everything that goes with it. And when you trick yourself into just opening the Ableton Live, all I have to do is open Ableton Live. Like,
Mhm.
as once you start, you realize that you love it. You
Yeah.
forget that you're having fun, and time passes.
Do you know about the finish your crappy tracks rule?
I've advocated don't be afraid to make bad songs or purposely
Yeah.
make bad songs.
Yeah. Finish your crappy tracks. I mean, like I regret so many I regret leaving everything in loop form and having like a bunch of great 64 bar loops but no arrangements.
Hmm.
So I started getting in the habit, even like when it starts getting into that, oh, I'm just really enjoying listening to this loop. I'm like immediately arrange it into something that's 3.5 minutes long, and then render it and then listen to it later and see if I want to go back to work on it. But I always make sure it's done.
Right.
And because it doesn't take long to arrange something in Ableton. You just throw
Yeah.
it on the timeline. Another arrangement trick for that is if you see a part in the timeline that's going on for too long, your track is getting boring.
Hmm.
So like if I have like 8 synth parts, let's just say, and my plus my drums, and I'm looking and I see one synth part going through the whole thing, I know that that's why I'm getting bored with my track.
Hmm.
So even if it's just taking out the bass for 8 measures or taking out the pads for a section, if you've got one track going throughout your entire song and it's not drums, there's a very good chance that track is what's dragging down is making your track like less interesting.
Hmm.
Just take parts out.
Yeah. I often do a arrangement by subtraction where if I have
Yes,
that loop,
yes,
I just
yes,
drag them all out and then cut things, take things
yes.
away, add things.
Yep, yep, yep.
Yeah. Or
I teach that in my remixing class. That
yeah.
exact thing. So it's good to know that there are other professionals out there doing this. So
Yeah, it's helpful and it's nice to print it. So even you can just listen to it the next day in the car. The Go ahead.
no, no,
Oh
no.
no, that makes it permanent.
I'm just like I don't mean to be contrary. I'm not trying
Please,
to
please. If you're
argue.
not contradicting me, I'm not going to learn anything.
Uh Never listen to your tracks unless you're working on them.
Okay.
My reason for that is one of the reasons that I haven't finished a bunch of tracks. I have hundreds of tracks that are not finished. Is because I rendered them and then I got sick of them. It wasn't an analysis process. It wasn't analytical and me going, oh, the hi-hats could be quieter or something like that. It was that I physically got bored with my own music because I kept enjoying the false dopamine rush of listening to it. Oh, I made something I really like. Yay. And then, as with any song, even if it's a song by an artist that you love, you're going to get sick of it if you listen to it over and over and over. So I have a rule where I only listen to a track when I'm working on it. And the minute I render it, I make sure I let it cool for a week and then I listen to it. It's about the fresh ears. But yeah, no, I think I mean, it may work for you. It definitely works when you listen to it in the car, you go for a walk, and then you'll hear things that you wouldn't normally hear. I'm not saying never render your track. I'm just saying be very careful about getting sick of your own tracks and your own music. And one of the dangers in listening to it before it's completely done, it's almost like tasting food. Like here's Francis with the food analogies. It's like tasting a dish before it's finished. and you've added all the ingredients, or you haven't caramelized the top, whatever. If the dish isn't finished, you shouldn't eat it. You should keep cooking. You can keep tasting it while you're cooking it, but don't serve it to your guests until you've actually finished the dish.
Don't eat
So
all the
sorry,
cake
I
before you
don't
put
mean I don't mean to be contrary, but
don't
that's
eat
just
all the
another
cake
way of
before you
looking
put
at
the
it.
icing on it.
Yes.
I get your point actually, and I can see why I have a lot of unfinished things for that reason, because I'll go around the next day in the car, and it's not that I'm listening to it to check my mix, which would be I'm working on it technically. I'm going for a walk.
Right.
I want to hear it in a different environment. It's because I'm kind of like, yay, I made something yesterday, and I'm just doing it to enjoy it or try to enjoy it.
Right. That it's fine to enjoy it, but sometimes what'll happen is that enjoyment process, especially if it's unfinished, enjoying your tracks before they're finished means you get sick of them and you have less motivation when you actually are working on them.
Yeah, because you burn out on things when you're working on them.
Yeah.
Because how many times do you listen to a 3-minute song when you're making it?
Right. Like a bunch. So if you say, I'm not saying you shouldn't listen. Obviously, you're making music, you have to listen to it. But if you save it for only when you're working on it, and then, watch TV, work on do a sound design project, whatever else you have to do in your life, give your ears a break. That's the other thing I always tell people: don't take enough ear breaks. I take an ear break. I take a minimum of 5 minutes every half hour, unless I really get into the zone and I'm being super productive. But even so, then it's like once an hour. I just get away from it because I'll come back and I'll immediately hear mixed stuff. So
Yeah.
or timing stuff.
Yeah, that's a big piece. You ears just get used to things.
Yeah,
If
this
you
is
just think about how you tune out the hum of the air conditioning after a while, and you don't even notice it's
as my
happening.
he says as my air conditioning comes back on. Hang on a second, my air conditioning literally just kicked in. I'll be right back.
I like that point though.
I feel bad that I was
no,
like
no, no, no,
I
no.
was counterpoint to that, but
I enjoy that because that's a good thing for me to think about, because there are times when I'm mixing something, I'm working on it, I want to hear it, and that's not the enjoyment like patting myself on the back kind of listening. That's how does this translate in the car? But
how does it translate to the car is an absolutely legitimate.
yeah,
It's a
but
legitimate question
it's
because you'll
not
hear things
always
in
what
the
I'm
car.
doing. Often it's I made something cool, let me hear it and see if I still like it, and I'm kind of like burning out my tolerance for the idea, because I
Mhm.
think that's something to think about. The songs we all work on ourselves, we probably listen to more than our favorite songs in the world in our whole life each time you work on a song. So
Oh,
you
yeah.
have a limited tolerance, I guess, for anything on repeat. So
That's like, well, and
burn it out like that
once a
is a bad
track is
idea.
released, I never listen to it again, which is another thing because people have said, well, I don't want to say never, but like I can count the times I listen to my own music once it's already come out. Like that's a
Hmm.
fraction. Like so, and I don't know why. I don't know why that. Like people say, do you ever listen to your old tracks or anything like that? And like, nope.
Hmm.
Tomorrow's more interesting than yesterday anyway, because tomorrow
Right.
hasn't happened yet. You still have time to change it. You still have time to fix it and make it different. But yesterday's already happened, so that's another reason I don't spend. I have my aunt is extremely nostalgic, and I adore her. I love her to pieces. So if she's listening to this, I love you, but I can't do nostalgia because yesterday's already happened, and tomorrow is potentially more interesting.
Hmm.
So
Hmm. Yeah, I think once in a while on shuffle things will come on, and sometimes it's really fun. Like it's inspiring. It's like, oh, I did that. I can do something else. I can. There's an empowerment, I think, when I hear stuff I've done, but it's unusual that I'll reach for.
sometimes I'll want to go back and revisit it or use it as inspiration if it's something, but it's not if it's been released. If it's been released, I almost never listen to it. Sometimes I'll go back and listen to my old doodles and I'll re-rank them because I use the 5 stars in iTunes. I really did. I've always been a rating
Huh.
fan in iTunes. That way I would be able to control how often things come up in shuffle. And then when something comes up in shuffle way too many times, I bring the stars down so it doesn't, because then I get sick of it.
That's funny. Smart. It's
But,
yeah, it's weird. Derek Sivers I had on the podcast, who founded CD Baby, and he's a kind of a philosopher. Really awesome to speak to him. But he spoke about releasing music in a very literal way that really stuck with me. Like, you're letting it go. It's not yours anymore. You're
oh,
unleashing it. Not just like you're putting it out and it's your track. It's like, no, it's you're letting go of it. You're putting that weight from your shoulders out, and I really like that kind of almost cathartic idea.
yeah,
Letting
yeah.
go.
That reminds me of something that's often attributed to Steven Spielberg. I'm pretty sure that he was quoting somebody else, is that movies are never finished, they're abandoned.
Yeah, I've heard that art is never finished, it's
Yeah,
abandoned.
it's
Yeah.
abandoned. So that's kind of that's sort of the same sort of thing.
Hmm. Yeah, because Lord knows you can carry on forever.
And then you get sick of it, and then you never want to hear it again.
Hmm.
So
It's true. So, we've got the new pack, right? So it's Tone Paper Ambient Products. Is that the name of the pack?
oh, Tone Paper, I did. Tone Paper was a
That's your
pandemic thing.
like 15-minute ambient pieces or 10-minute ambient pieces.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's really cool.
that was
Meditative stuff.
another wow. Yeah, that was another pandemic, preoccupation
Mm.
where, especially in light of just everything that was going on in this country at the time, I wanted to make I had been fiddling with ambient music, sort of like Brian Eno, Aphex Twin kind of stuff. But it was really generative, so I was like using generative techniques to keep it kind of constantly evolving and changing in the background. And I wanted to make it, so I wanted to make this ambient record and just put it out through DistroKid. If people listened to it, great. If people didn't listen to it, I also didn't want to put my name on it, which was a little, in retrospect, it could have been a bad move. But I also it didn't sound anything like my other music. So I used an alias, and the alias was Symplesound. And then as soon as I had the idea to use the alias as Symplesound, I was like, oh, I should just release this album as presets as well.
Hmm.
So I released an Ableton pack of all just like sounds that are optimized for making ambient music. And then once I did I realized, okay, well, now I've got this Ableton pack. Why don't I do a Serum pack? And, because I used a few Serum sounds in there, and I was like, well, why don't I do a Serum pack of just sounds optimized for ambient, and a bunch of generative sounds in there. And I just did, and then I realized this is like a thing, because it's the sounds that you use to. I don't understand why people don't sell the sounds when they make a track, unless they're using presets. Unless they're using, if you make a track using presets, you can't sell the sounds. But if you make a track using your own sounds, you can sell the sounds. And I guarantee you, without going into a lot of detail, guarantee you that I've made more money off the presets than I have off the Spotify plays.
Hmm.
So.
Right. Yeah, that was good stuff. I enjoyed that. I was doing my yoga to that for a little while there.
So yeah, I was happy with it. I was pleased. I was very pleased with that release once it came out. If anybody wants to check it out, you can just Tone Paper, TONEPAPER. I don't know if you, in the show notes, throw a link to it.
It'll be in there.
Thank you.
But what was the name of the pack that just came out now with Tom?
That was Tom Wolfe. Tom Wolfe. That was just. It's like I put it out under his company. He has a company. His website is Synthvault, synthvault.net. It's a free download. You have to sign up for his site, but he's got a lot of other free packs in there. So if you're a synth nerd who's looking for quality free stuff, it's like I have free packs on Symplesound. If you go to Symplesound, it drives traffic to your website, and you're giving stuff away. You're generating goodwill. So that's a free download available. It's just as of today, July 1st, 2022, and forevermore. So synthvault.net.
Very cool. Is there anything you want to whet our appetite for before we go? Or do we leave it shrouded in mystery?
No, I have lots of things in the pipeline. I have tons of things in the pipeline. If you're a Roland Cloud user, I've got a really cool new pack that I can't divulge what the pack is about, but if you're a Jupiter 4 pack coming out at some point in time this month, I am currently putting the finishing touches on a new pack for the Op 6 that is all, people like, it's all rhythms. It's all like, they're not sequences, they're not melodic. It's just like the sounds are like, the textures are rhythmic. It's very hard to describe. But Korg is putting out a pack for the Op 6 that's all highly rhythmic. So if you normally use loops on Splice, grab one of these presets instead and play your music, but the preset becomes the loop. So it's a highly controllable loop, basically, pack. I'm working on another pack for Serum because I've got 4 out, including tone paper. I'm working on another pack that's going to be optimized for really vintage analog sounds, using a lot of my super not so secret, because they're open source, tricks in terms of making sounds more analog. So that's coming out, I'm hoping, by the fall. But the ones that are coming out like in July, August are the Jupiter 4 pack and the Op 6 pack, the pack that was just released today with Tom Wolfe. And I just took on a project for Roland that I'm starting as soon as I finish the Korg pack. And I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but let's just say I'm a huge fan of yacht rock. So everybody's always expecting me to do like, these highly electronic packs. And I wanted to do a pack that was a bit more of an homage to 70s and 80s yacht rock.
That's cool. So. There's a website I kind of check out for new music, Gorilla versus Bear. And they every year do a yacht rock mix. It's great every year.
I'm all about the yacht. I grew up on yacht rock. That's how old I am. I grew up on yacht rock. So I'll put it on when if I need to chill the F out, I put on yacht rock. If I need to clean the house, I put on Chic and Jamiroquai. I have different playlists for different tasks.
I talk about that a lot when we're making music, to think about what the listener is going to be doing when they listen to your song. Like, what's the point of your music? What's the activity? And for me, that way of thinking has always made it so much easier.
Do you have a comment section on you? I mean, I honestly haven't glanced at your YouTube. I listen to your podcast normally using the podcast app rather than
comments on YouTube.
Yeah. All right. I say nice things. But I'd be really curious as to how many yacht rock fans there are out there and what people listen to. Like, I'd be curious as to what kind of music people have for certain tasks. I know a lot of people listen to, driving electronic music for working out, but like, what's your secret kind of music that you listen to when you have a specific task, like cleaning the house? Like, what do you listen to when you're cleaning the house? Most people have a specific genre that they listen to. For road trips, I listen to indie psychedelic. Like, I make a playlist of only like dream pop, chill wave, and indie rock that's kind of got a psychedelic vibe. If you really want to hear, there's this one artist named Vinyl Williams. It's John Williams' grandson, like the film composer.
Wow.
And it's called Vinyl Williams. And it's completely ethereal, but still being a band, like psychedelic, ethereal, guitar based with like really ambient production. It's a love it or hate it kind of thing, but it's fun for road trips. I discovered on another cool. There's a sound designer named Brother Tiger who does a bunch of stuff for Roland. And I love the actual music he makes. I really love his music.
Yeah, I wound up picking up an album off of Bandcamp not too long ago.
Yeah. Spotify shoveled a track of his at me, and I was like, "Ooh, I like this artist." And I just went and investigated the rest of it. It's kind of like he's got a lot of new records out that are that are kind of ambient. But anyway, so for road trips, it's a totally different kind of music than for cleaning the house or chilling out or yacht rock. There's not a lot of yacht rock on my road trips, but I love yacht rock.
Yeah. So leave a comment, smash the like button.
Smash the like. Don't forget to hit subscribe and like.
It's been awesome talking to you again, man.
It's been great talking to you too, Brian.
I feel like we could go for many more hours here.
Yeah, I feel like we could.
Well,
next year I may have some stuff that I am not talking about right now, but next year I may have some stuff and we may have to revisit this conversation.
I bet you will. That'll be good. So there's francisprev.com. There's Symplesound.
Symplesound, SYMPLE sound.com. There's my YouTube channel, which has the watch and learn stuff on there. There's also something called Let Me Be Your Soundtrack Bay, which we won't get into during this podcast, but we can revisit that at a future date.
That's nice.
And it's like, francisprev.com and Symplesound are pretty much how you find me.
Cool. And there'll be a wealth of show notes.
And follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Instagram is such a weird mixed bag of van life and synthesizers.
Yeah, that's actually a really cool other, I guess, magazine you're involved with.
Yeah, Van Life Magazine, Chewing Gum Magazine. So
yeah, but it looks like you have a great time, and you always have some fun toys with you and some cool locations. So it's nice to see you're doing that too. Very good. Well, folks, there you have it. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Francis.
My pleasure. All right. Have a great rest of your everything, and I'll see you soon.
Excellent. Hey, if you enjoyed the Music Production Podcast, please consider giving it a review on your favorite podcast provider and share it with a friend, somebody that you think might enjoy the show and get something out of it. That would mean a lot to me. And if you want to check out more of my work, including sound packs, tutorials, etc., head over to brianfunk.com. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great day.